teams had certified pilots on board. You confirm the fact that some of them were trained in the United States. Time magazine is reporting today that some of these pilots had flown for an airline in Saudi Arabia. Do you know if those pilots were trained in the U.S. or in fact in Saudi Arabia?
I'm not prepared to comment on the Time article.
And why is that, sir?
Well, there are certain things that we want to say or wouldn't want to say about various pieces of evidence and leads which we are undertaking, and it's not our intention to do anything that would compromise either the kind of intelligence we receive in this case or the kind of progress we might make in apprehending these perpetrators of these acts of war.
All right, CNN is also being told by sources it is possible that members of each of the hijacking team may not even have known each other prior to commandeering the jets, and that perhaps they waited on board for signals from somebody somewhere else to tell them what to do. Can you confirm that is true this morning?
No, I'm not prepared to comment on that kind of allegation.
Is it anywhere close to being accurate?
I'm not prepared to comment on that kind of allegation.
All right, let's move on to something else. There is a feeling among some Americans as they watch how successfully you've been able to turn up information on some of these suspects over the last 24 hours or so, and they're saying, you know, why couldn't anybody have stopped these guys? What do you tell them this morning?
Well, I can tell them that we did not have any information that these kinds of attacks were going to take place, and that, frankly, this is a big country with lots of space for people who then, if they come together in a concentrated way and then don't care about their identity because they're going to perish in the crime, may leave evidence that otherwise would not have been as clearly available. This is a unique perpetration of acts of war in a very criminal sense, but those who perpetrated these acts understood that their own involvement would end their lives. So we don't have the normal setting where people who commit the crimes are not a part of, and normally we try to use information from them and what they do after their criminal acts to put the story together. That's not a part of our capacity in this setting.
I respect how cautious you have to be about what kind of intelligence information you're going to share and what not. Are you able to tell us this morning if your investigation has led you towards any one responsible party?
I'm not able to identify any one responsible party for you today. I would say that we are making progress in this investigation and following and developing an understanding of the kinds of associations that the individuals who perpetrated these acts of war had.
Mr. Attorney General, one last question for you this morning. The President yesterday said that the United States government will spend what it takes to not only clean up the horrible destruction in Washington and New York, but also to combat terrorism. Are you confident that Congress is going to give you the funds that you think you need to, in fact, combat terrorism, so this won't happen again?
Well, I believe that the entire nation is united here. I've talked to members of the Congress. I've heard them speak, members of both parties. This is one of those situations where Americans set aside other things that might divide us. And we are, I think, conspicuously and appropriately united in this setting. And I believe that the members of Congress will act in good faith to work with the administration here to make sure that the public can be assured of its safety and security to every extent possible. We obviously want this country to be back at the business freely as the kind of culture we ought to be, as a leading culture of freedom in the world. And we don't believe that the kinds of costs associated with that are beyond what we should undertake. We're going to get that done.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you very much for joining us on CNN this morning. We very much appreciate your time. And right now we're going to head back to Atlanta, where Miles O'Brien is standing by. Good morning again.
Good morning again, Paula. Let's take a look at some pictures. Lower Manhattan, as the efforts continue to salvage and perhaps, hope against hope, maybe find somebody still alive under the rubble now, 47 hours after the first attack on the World Trade Center, the dust literally has yet to clear. 3,000 tons of rubble were carted away from that site by boat to a garbage dump in Staten Island just yesterday. A quiet, sickeningly quiet morning once again in New York as the smoke continues to rise off of what was the World Trade Center. Casualty numbers are, quite frankly, appear to be staggering. There are requests now, we are told, for in excess of 10,000 body bags. The numbers that we do know, 200 firefighters are missing, 154 workers from the Port Authority missing, 57 New York police officers and Port Authority officers missing, 38 members of a Manhattan management company missing, and then at the Pentagon as well, 150 unaccounted for there. The numbers will continue to rise. Meanwhile, at hospitals all around New York, medical personnel are taxed trying to take care of severely injured people, many of them burned, many of them facing severe trauma. Brian Palmer is at St. Vincent's Hospital. Brian.
Good morning, Miles. We are indeed in front of St. Vincent's. You can see the streets behind us are actually quite quiet. There was an auxiliary police officer was just brought in a few minutes ago with respiratory problems. About 453 people have been through the ER at St. Vincent's, 263 at affiliated hospitals in the outer boroughs. Not the numbers that they were expecting, not the numbers that they were hoping. Now, 4 people who were pulled from the rubble yesterday were actually brought to Bellevue Hospital, but most, in fact, according to the hospital spokesman, all of the emergency services personnel were brought here to St. Vincent's. St. Vincent's will most likely emerge as the trauma center, pretty much the main trauma center in Manhattan, north of the blast zone, because of the state of emergency announced by Mayor Giuliani last night. From 14th Street north to the southern tip of Manhattan, this is a frozen zone. Authorized vehicles, police vehicles, emergency vehicles only, and whatever vehicles get permission from the police department. Now, hospital spokesman also repeated the mayor's announcement last night that a citywide patient services center is being set up at the Lexington Avenue Armory, which is on the east side of Manhattan, where people can come to file missing persons reports. And it's also going to be a clearinghouse. There will be grief counselors on site. Miles?
Brian, do you have any sense how many patients at these hospitals might in fact be unidentified right now? There are a lot of families obviously trying to be reunited with people who they think might be injured and under the care of one of these hospitals.
Miles, there's not a lot of information of that level of specificity coming out. What people are suggesting is that they do contact the authorities, and I think the citywide patient services facility is going to be functioning, and people will be able to go to that center and also call to get that kind of information.
And one other thing, that fatigue has got to be setting in among the medical personnel, obviously way overtaxed. Are they getting enough support from other hospitals, other areas to get them through this?
Well, Miles, it's sort of astounding because we've been, all of us around here have been up around the clock collecting information, but these people are actually treating the injured, and it's truly phenomenal. There are volunteers coming from all over the country. We've ran into people from as far south as Texas, people from Massachusetts. So folks are being spelled, they are being relieved, but I think they are being pretty overburdened. Now here at St. Vincent's, the onslaught of injured people that they braced for did not come, which is not a great sign. It leads people to believe that perhaps they're not a lot more, there just aren't tremendous numbers of injured, and that they may be pulling more bodies out of the blast site. Miles?
CNN's Brian Palmer at St. Vincent Hospital in New York. Thank you very much for your time. Let's turn it now to the White House. CNN's Kelly Wallace on the North Lawn with word that the nation's air traffic, the nation's airport, might be on their way to some resumption of normalcy. Kelly.
Well, Miles, yes, I was just handed a statement coming from the Transportation Secretary, Norman Mineta. Here's what we can tell you. The Secretary has ordered the national airspace system reopened to commercial and private aviation effective 11 a.m. Eastern Time today. Now, that's for commercial and private aviation. That's the airspace system. The Secretary saying, though, that decisions about reopening airports will be made on a case-by-case basis. So, again, for people listening, sitting out there at home, each individual airport, decisions being made on a case-by-case basis. But overall, the national airspace system open for commercial and private traffic. Decisions, though, made for individual airspace, individual airports. Secretary Mineta saying this decision made after a series of meetings throughout the day and into last night. Secretary also saying that anyone planning on flying should check with the airline regarding the level of service and flight schedules, and to be sure to allow plenty of time to deal with the new security procedures. As CNN has reported all throughout the day yesterday, the Secretary ordering new security guidelines in place. Some of those guidelines include an end to curbside checking, many more searches going on of passengers and of luggage, and also, as we know, no knives allowed to be transported onto planes. That's the latest from here. Miles, back to you.
Kelly, is it safe to presume then, if Mr. Mineta is issuing this, that all airports have basically indicated they're complying with the new rules?
Well, I don't want to go too far here, Miles, to be perfectly frank and honest. Just handed this information. Obviously, an FAA has issued a directive yesterday calling on all the nation's airports to impose new security guidelines. And until airports adhere and implement those guidelines, they are not able to reopen. So you can be assured, according to the federal government, that if any airports go ahead and open up for operations, that they will have those new guidelines and new security measures in place. Miles?
All right, CNN's Kelly Wallace at the White House. Let's head across the Potomac River to CNN's Patty Davis, who is at Ronald Reagan National Airport. Patty, it's hard to even describe the kind of logjam which has been created by this unprecedented grounding now for nearly 48 hours now, and it will extend beyond 48 hours. Any sense from the airlines there as to how long it will take to get things back to normal levels of flow?
Well, that's a really good question here, and that's something that the airport authority is having to deal with. As far as this airport, in terms of being ready, it says it is ready, but having their announcement coming out earlier, before the announcement from the Department of Transportation that the airspace would be open today. Earlier today, Washington Reagan Airport had said that it would not be reopening for flights today. Now, that may change, being that the national airspace, it appears, has been reopened at about 11 a.m. this morning. But right now, it is a virtual ghost town here at this airport. Plane after plane sitting on the tarmac. Inside, also, the airport, virtually nobody, only janitors, a few workers for the airlines as well. As for Dulles Airport, it is unlikely. The airport authority says that there will be flights operating there until late this afternoon, if at all. Of course, that could change now that the airspace is reopening. Up to now, only flights that had been diverted were allowed to get into the skies. And in terms of when passengers, or what passengers should be expecting once they do come back to the airports, here's what one of the airline passenger groups had to say.
The effect on airline passengers is going to be quite significant. You know, the old days where you could get to the airport at the last minute and, you know, run through to the counter and the gate and get on the airplane, those days are gone. It's going to be a very long, slow process to get through multiple layers of security.
Now, New York airports, Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, also indicating that they are absolutely ready to accept passengers. They said that was depending on what the FAA did. It now appears that DOT has decided that it will reopen the airspace at 11 o'clock. Miles?
All right, Patty, I think it's worth recapping for people who may be contemplating getting on a flight soon exactly what they might expect when they come to an airport.
Well, at the airports across the nation, heightened security. There are a lot more police officers there. Also, you cannot bring any knives of any kind on board any of these airplanes at all. We're talking even those pocket knives. You cannot do curbside check-ins here at the airport. You cannot check in off-site. You cannot, if you have an e-ticket, you cannot go directly to the gate. The FAA is requiring that everybody, even if you have a hard ticket, perhaps your travel agent issued you a boarding pass, everybody, all those passengers required to go to the gate, to the ticket counter to actually check in, physically check in. So it's going to be a longer process checking in. It's going to be a little bit more frustrating for passengers as they come to the airports today, perhaps through the rest of the week. But these security measures, these heightened security measures, now in place. Miles?
CNN's Patty Davis at Ronald Reagan National Airport in Washington. Let's turn it now to Bonnie Anderson, who is at Hartsfield Airport, the second busiest airport in the world, Atlanta, Georgia. Bonnie, what's the scene there?
Well, Miles, as you know, on any given day, on any normal day at this time of the morning, Hartsfield would be a bustling hub of activity. Not so today.